I love these What's New videos because it gives me an opportunity to show you all of the new features and improvements that we've been working hard to bring to you. So for this Lightroom 9.5 August 2026 update, we've added some of the most commonly requested features that were first introduced in Adobe Camera Raw not too long ago. And I really think you're going to find them useful with your editing workflow. So with that, let's dive in. All right, so let's start with the usual PSA in that you'll want to make sure you have the latest version of Lightroom installed. So click on your Creative Cloud desktop app. You can click on the apps button here from this left toolbar, and then we'll be working with Lightroom. And so the latest version is 9.5. And so just make sure you have that installed. I believe this will say install or update. I can't remember. But uh, if it doesn't say open, that means you don't have the latest version installed. So we're working with 9.5. And so let's go to Lightroom. The first feature that I want to show you is something that we introduced in Adobe Camera Raw not too long ago. And this is the stuff that makes me happiest. It doesn't always happen like this, but when we're able to bring you features that we first introduced in Camera Raw into Lightroom relatively quickly. And so the feature that I want to show you is masking refinement. So masking refinement is a combination of two sliders. We'll go, for example, to the masking panel, and I'll just start with adding a background mask. So you'll now see that for the masks, there are these two additional sliders here. There's feather and edge. And they do exactly what they sound like. Edge controls the edge of the mask, so you can either expand or contract it, and feather adds a feather. So when would we want to use this? Well, there's several, instances. Like if I zoom in here, and I want to adjust the background mask. I'll start with the edge. That's usually what I start with. And to illustrate, you can see if I drag the slider to the right, what it's doing is it's expanding the background mask. And in this case, what that means is the background mask is going to encroach on basically the subject because background is a select subject mask inverted. If I take the slider to the left, you can see how that background mask is kind of moving away from the subject. And so you can kind of see that up here too. Watch, I'll do this again. You can see that when I expand the edge, it actually goes over the subject. So for me, what I like in this case, like with background, is I'm going to basically bring this edge slider. So I'm going to move it away from the subject, but then I'm also going to add a feather. And so you can see that the hard edge of the mask is getting softer. And of course, it can get super soft, which I don't find very useful. Just a little bit of a feather generally helps. And then, of course, with the mask dialed in, you can go ahead and make your edits however you see fit. So here I can just maybe add a little bit of a saturation boost to the background and maybe warm it up a bit. But there are other use cases for the mask refinement tool. So let's go back and create a new mask here. I'll go to person because we've identified a person here. And I'm going to create a mask for the eye sclera and the iris and pupil. And I'm going to create two separate masks. All right, so let's start with the iris and pupil. So if I zoom in here, you can see, let's turn on the overlay. You see how the mask kind of bleeds over almost onto the top eyelids over here. And this is where refinement can be really helpful because watch, I'm going to take the edge slider. If I bring it to the right, it's going to expand the border, but I don't want that. I actually want to constrict it just until I see kind of the edges of the iris and the pupil. So right here, maybe even a little bit more. But I can also add a little bit of a feather, and that's going to kind of soften that edge. And then what I can do is take the exposure slider and make that area a little bit brighter. I can also add a saturation boost and also maybe a tiny bit of texture to that area. And then I could do the same thing with the eye sclera mask. So again, eye sclera, you can see how it's kind of bleeding over. So I can take the edge slider and bring it to the left, right around here. And then let's add a feather to kind of soften the edge of that mask. And then very, very subtly, let's brighten that. Maybe let's add a little bit of highlights. And then let's desaturate this area here. And so, if we zoom out, you can see the effects of the masks. It just gives you the kind of the peace of mind to really dial in the masks. I've used it also a ton with sky, select sky. So if you want to kind of really adjust contract the mask in case it bleeds over a horizon, you can do that. But you want to be careful because, especially with skies, um, if you contract it too much, you're going to have a strip along the edge of your horizon. And so if you're adjusting, say, you're adding maybe dehaze or you're adjusting the saturation or the exposure, you'll see that strip. So that's where the feather comes in my opinion, to really save the day because you don't want that little band, that little halo. And so, yeah, just be careful with that. But this was something that when we introduced this in Camera Raw, in the comments, everyone was like, when is this coming to Lightroom? Well, it's here in Lightroom. And it's also in Lightroom Classic. All right, so the next feature is Generative Expand. Now, Generative Expand was in Camera Raw and in Photoshop for a while, but only recently did we make major improvements in Camera Raw. And so now you can access it in Lightroom, but it's only available in Lightroom, not in Lightroom Classic. And the primary reason for that is because if you use Generative Expand with the Firefly model, which I'll show you in a minute, it'll require a credit. And so we don't have any credit bearing features in Lightroom Classic, which is why it's currently in Lightroom. All right, so I'm actually going to stick with this photo just to show you kind of the basics of how Generative Expand works. You can see, I mean, if I hit the backslash key, this is the unedited photo, and it's basically as is. And more importantly, if I go to crop, you can see that this is the uncropped original canvas. Now, I kind of wish I had a little bit more space at the top here. You can kind of see how the edge of the fedora is really almost at the edge of the frame, and that bothers me. It always bothered me. And this is like a perfect use case for Generative Expand. Now, there are some mechanisms involved with Generative Expand that I want to show you. So before I enable Expand, the first thing I'm going to do is click on the AI Edit Status menu here, because I want to show you that you can see I've already applied certain AI edits, Gen Remove, the adaptive profile, and adaptive masks. I just actually showed you the adaptive masks in the previous section as part of showing you the masking refinement. Now, to apply Generative Expand, it's really straightforward. You see this checkbox up here, it says Enable Expand, so I'm going to select it. And now the entire canvas outside of the original photo turns into checkerboards or transparencies. You can also see we have this Generative Expand panel over here in crop. And the reason why it's grayed out is because Generative Expand will only work when we detect transparency. Currently, we don't have any transparency. So let's fix that. Let's add some transparency. I'll zoom out a little bit and I'm going to click here. I'm going to lock my aspect ratio to keep the 3:2. And I'm just going to drag out and I'm visualizing here, like how much extra space would I like? And I could have just increased it from the top. Like I could have unlocked this and just increased the top, but I want to preserve the original aspect ratio. And so here's what I was just telling you about a minute ago about, that this requires a credit. You have two options here. You can either use Firefly Fill and Expand, which is an updated model for this particular use case, or you can use the legacy content aware fill. This does not require credit if you use content aware fill. Firefly Fill and Expand does, and it's indicated with this little icon over here. If you click this, you'll see how many credits you have, as well as the ability to purchase additional credits if you want. And so let's start filling that transparent area using the Firefly Fill and Expand model. I'll go ahead and click on Generate. And there we go. This looks great. Like personally, to me, this looks so much better because I have more breathing room above the hat. Now, let's kind of look at a few things that have happened since clicking generate. The first thing is you'll see that we now have 3 variations, which is common when you use, for example, like gen remove, and you're using a Firefly model. We give you 3 variations. You can arrow through these to see the different options and choose the one you want. Now, if the 3 that were generated are not to your liking, you can click generate more. And if you have the Firefly Fill and Expand model selected, you'll get 3 more, but it will cost another credit. Now, there is one exception to this. If you are a subscriber to the Creative Cloud Pro plan, it used to be called the Creative Cloud All Apps plan. Basically, if you have the whole thing, then you have unlimited Generative Expand generations. It's just that if you have, say, the Creative Cloud Photography plan or the Lightroom plan, though in those situations, every time you click on Generate with Firefly, for Generative Expand specifically, it'll require 1 credit. So I'll also go ahead, I'm going to change the model here to content aware fill, and let's click generate more. And so what you'll see is we actually have, instead of 3 additional variations, we had 1 more. We had 3, and that's because the content aware fill method will generate 1 variation at a time, but it requires no credits. And so my recommendation is, if you're filling in something like this, where it's kind of like a flat, it doesn't have a lot of detail, flat area, start with content aware fill. It's actually a lot faster, and it might give you the results that you want. But if you're working with expanding a complex area, definitely just stick with Firefly Fill and Expand. Again, it'll require credit, but the results 9 times out of 10 are fantastic. And so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to select the just the first variation using Firefly. And the next thing you have to do is decide, do you want to cancel and just abandon the generation, or do you want to commit it? So I'm going to click keep, which will commit it. And here's a new dialog that appears. This will appear only if you have specific AI edits. Basically, if you look at the AI edit order of operations list, anything that is from the remove edit and above, you'll get this dialog. And if you're not sure what I just said, what AI edit order of operations is, maybe you've heard of it, but you don't remember, I'll leave a link to a deep dive video that I produced a few months ago. Definitely check it out. But the point is that if you have an edit from remove or above on that list, you'll see this dialog. And what we're saying is we are going to flatten certain AI edits if you choose to commit the variation, which we want to. Now, fortunately, because I'm working in my cloud library, we're also going to create kind of like a failsafe or kind of like a rewind state by automatically creating a version called before generative expand. And I'll show you that right now. So I'll go ahead and click on continue. And we now have our photo. But if I click on the AI edit status button here, you'll see now that I have this section called flatten edits. If I expand it, you'll see we now have gen expand and we have remove. What this means is the gen remove strokes that I applied before I even started this video, those have been baked in, meaning I can't go ahead and change the variations. And another point is, because I apply Gen Expand, which sits higher up on that AI edit order of operations list, I ended up invalidating adaptive profile and masking. Fortunately, that's easy to fix by clicking on Update All. And so now we are in this finalized state. We've expanded the photo and we've also baked in certain edits. Now you're like, okay, well, what happens if I want to go back? Let's say I need to go back and adjust one of the gen remove strokes. In that case, you would go to versions, and just like the dialog said, we created this for you, this before generative expand version. It's under the name tab here. If I click this, you will now see we are in a pre-expand state. But more importantly, if I go to remove, you'll see there are my gen remove strokes that I applied. These 2 over here, this one over here, and the variations that I used. So what does this mean? Well, because we rewound, you can see we still have the expanded canvas, but we need to refill those pixels. In this case, I'm not going to go through the expand process again. I'm just going to undo, and then I just need to update this one more time. And so that's how Gen Expand works. Now, I'd say that's the primary use case for Gen Expand, right? Like, you have a photo, you want to outcrop, you want to expand the canvas, and then you want to fill those pixels in. But there are 2 other use cases where the Gen Expand fill model can really come in useful. So let me show you those right now. All right, so this is a photo of the Brooklyn Bridge that I took many, many years ago. It's a very popular location, but as you can see, I kind of messed up the geometry. We have some seriously distorted lines. Fortunately, we've got tools to fix that very easily. I'll go to the crop tool here, and what I'm going to do is click on this auto upright magic wand icon. And you can see that we now have a upright Brooklyn Bridge. Unfortunately, it came at the expense of the original composition. You can see we now have this missing area here. Now, historically, the thing that I would usually do is constrain to crop. And that's also a quick change. There used to be a checkbox over here that would say constrain crop. That has been moved to this icon up here. So if I click this, you can see it's constraining the crop to all active pixels, meaning everything that doesn't have a transparent area. But this is not good because my whole composition is really kind of messed up. Like I don't want the bottom of the frame to be over here. So let me undo that. And this is where Gen Expand comes in again, because Gen Expand is always looking for transparent areas. And it doesn't have to mean that you expand the canvas. In this situation here, I corrected geometry and it resulted in these two transparent areas. And so just like before, I can go ahead and click on Generate and I can choose my variations to see if there's something that works. So this looks good. Again, I can create 3 more if I want, or I can try using the content aware method. But like I said, Firefly generally will do a great job. And so the last thing I need to do is click keep to commit that. And then now you can see that we have a correct geometry to the photo and we preserve the original aspect ratio. And if I hit the backslash key, you could see that was the original photo. Like, yeah, it's a bummer. I don't know why I took the photo like that, but fortunately, I'm able to fix it here using the existing geometry tools that we've had in Lightroom, but also filling those impacted areas using Gen Expand. The third use case has to do with panoramas. So I actually took these photos earlier today, and you can see I didn't do it intentionally. I honestly, everyone, I really tried hard, but look at this is my attempt at going horizontal. Like, what is wrong with me? It's just how it was. It was handheld, and that's just the way it is. So let's go ahead though. I'm going to select these 6 photos, right click, go to photo merge, and then select panorama merge. And as you can see, Lightroom does a good job of merging those images, but there's a ton of transparent areas. And there have been ways that you can kind of fix this. Like you could have auto cropped it, which is basically a constraint to crop, but that affects the original composition. You can do a boundary warp to kind of distort the photo if you want, or you can have clicked this fill edges over here, which, it does an okay job, but all things considered, I'm just going to go ahead here and click on merge because now if I open this photo up and I go to crop, you can see there are transparent areas, which means that I can use the Firefly fill and expand model here to get a better result. So I'll go ahead and click on generate. And there we go. We were able to use a far superior method to fill those areas in, which allows me to kind of preserve the original stitch. Of course, we'll go ahead and click on keep to commit that. And there we go. Now, there's technically one other use case for Gen Expand, and it has to do with another new feature that we're introducing in Lightroom 9.5, and that is render to DNG. So, render to DNG has numerous use cases, but I think the most common one is to use it in concert with Gen Expand. So renders to DNG is exactly what it sounds like. You are invoking renders to DNG, which will take a snapshot of your photo, the crop, the edits, everything, and just bake in a new DNG file, but it's not a linear raw DNG. It's a TIFF file. Imagine you exported a TIFF file, converted it to DNG, and then re-imported. We're saving all of those steps. Basically, it does it in one shot. So I want to make sure you're not confused if you see this, that it's not a raw file. It's a TIFF file baked as a DNG, but I'm going to show you, in my opinion, the most common, the most important use case for it with Gen Expand. Okay, so I'll go ahead here. I'm just going to hit auto. So you can see I have all these edits here. I'll apply a little S-curve super quickly. Basically, I'm showing you that I'm editing the photo. Something like this looks good. Now, let's say I want to isolate this fella over here with the camera on the swing. And let's say I want to create a 9:16 post for social media. So I can go to crop here and, I could crop like this. And let's change the aspect ratio to 16:9 and let's put it over here. So something like this. And you can see here, okay, this is the shot. Now, let's just say for whatever reason, you need more space around here. And so you go to crop and you're like, all right, cool. Well, I need a bit more space like this, a bit more space like that. And the problem is that you have all of these surrounding pixels on either side. No matter what, you can't Gen Expand this in this state because, again, if we go to crop, all of these pixels are still here. And so this is where render to DNG comes in and it's really helpful. What I usually do is I get the crop tight, basically to what I think the kind of minimum crop is. So this is my minimum crop position. Let me bring it up a little bit more. In fact, I'm going to crop it in even a bit more because I don't want this fence or that wall behind him. All right. So this is the shot here. And again, I cannot use Gen Expand to expand this canvas because of all of this other stuff. So this is where something like render to DNG will be very helpful because I can basically bake this into a new file. Now, of course, I could go ahead and export this as a new file, and then I have to re-import it and all that stuff. But it's just so much more convenient to do it as is. So watch, I'm going to right click and you'll see there is this option here, render to DNG one photo. I'll select it. You'll get a dialog that says that this is a new DNG file that will be saved. All of your edits are permanently baked. You can't undo it because it's a new file. But the important thing is that this is a non-raw file. Do not think that just because this is a DNG, that you'll have access to all of the raw tools. So I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Let's drop to grid. And you can see this file appears right next to it, right there. You can see it says dash rendered. And if I go into the photo, first, notice that all of the edits are zeroed out. And more importantly, this is the whole point. If I go to crop and I enable expand, there are no other pixels. Those pixels are not in this shot. And so I can zoom out and I could expand this. So something like this, and then click generate. And of course I get my variations here. So this one looks great. Let's click keep. And I am off to the races here. Because again, in this original photo, I couldn't, if I went to crop, look, I didn't have as much room. And so by being able to render DNG here, I basically snip off all of those pixels. I bake in all of my edits and I can do a nice quick gen expand. All right, so those are all of the new features added to Lightroom 9.5. I do love seeing that we're bringing over some of the more popular features recently added to Camera Raw over to Lightroom, and we're not going to stop with that. So with that, if you want to learn everything there is to know about Lightroom, desktop, mobile, and web, please check out my course called Lightroom Everywhere. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. I also mentioned how I've got this video here that will teach you everything you need to know about the AI Edit Order of Operations list. Please check that out, or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.